Good morning.
And
it is
now airbags are more dangerous there.
It's 8:41, and Ron will tell us about that tomorrow, what the update is on that. But 8:41 right now. Welcome back to CW Iowa Live. Our good friend Michael Jankins is here, bankruptcy attorney, and we were in the middle of a discussion last time we were here about different things you can and cannot keep when it comes to bankruptcies, and you want to continue with the conversation.
That's right, because last time we spoke about a few of them, but I didn't want to leave people with the impression that that's all they can keep and get them worrying, so I want to at least let people know there's other things too.
Because you can hang on to a little more than you might realize.
Yes, I mean, a lot of our clients keep everything, which is kind of a good thing.
That's why you need a good bankruptcy attorney, folks, like this guy here who knows.
So we've covered houses and cars. What other items are we talking about now?
Well, people's wedding ring, at least for the wife, that's sometimes important. Although we have a lot of clients that come in, and when we have their assets being disclosed on our worksheets and where it asks about wedding rings and jewelry, it's amazing how many people have none. So I don't know if they've already pawned them off. Or
No, what about wedding rings? Let's use that as an example, because you can have wedding rings that value anywhere from a couple of bucks to thousands and thousands of dollars.
They don't put a limit on the value, so I guess love is unlimited when it comes to bankruptcy.
Really?
At least for the wedding ring.
How about that?
All right, so you said just for the wedding ring. How about some other jewelry that you might have?
For other jewelry, and I sure hope I get this right because I didn't double check my list, but I believe on your other jewelry it's $2,000. That doesn't sound like a lot of money.
It doesn't.
But when it comes to buying jewelry, the markup is so tremendously high on jewelry that when a person actually tries to liquidate jewelry, get money for it, there's so limited places that they can go. I mean, they can go to pawn shops or some of the stores in Des Moines that purchase secondhand jewelry if it's got value, but I mean, they give 20 cents, 25 cents on the dollar. So if somebody bought something for $1,000, they might only be able to get a couple hundred or $250 for it anyway.
And that's what it would fall under?
So I was looking at liquidation prices when we're in bankruptcy, because if they can't keep it, someone's got to sell it to turn it into money.
Got it. So it isn't what you paid for it, it's what somebody would pay for it.
That's right.
So that number is a little bit better than
So it's a lot, it's a lot better. And a lot of the jewelry that our clients have isn't really high-end jewelry. I mean, they buy it from some of the department store jewelry stores, and they don't really, I don't know if I should say this is just my opinion, but I don't know that they carry the highest quality of gemstones in the mass stores. I think the specialized jewelry stores carry much higher quality gems, and they're going to have higher value. But that doesn't seem to be a big issue in our cases. Now, something that's very valuable, and it's an actual bankruptcy planning tool, is your life insurance. Now, we're not talking about the term policies that the premiums are very small, but whole life or variable universal life. These are policies that actually accumulate value while you're alive, and you actually have sort of an investment there.
So if you've had a policy for a long period of time, you have a cash value.
You can accumulate value. I mean, we've had policies that had $20,000, $25,000 in them because people started them out relatively young. And people can borrow that money out of their policies during their life, so that's why it's an asset. It's got value. And so there's a limitation on this, though. The beneficiary has to be your spouse or one of your kids, and every once in a while we'll have someone who doesn't have a spouse because they're divorced and doesn't have kids, and they have one of these life insurance policies. So we have to be very careful, because sometimes we have to have those liquidated before we file so that he can use the money for something else.
That was my next question. What do you do in that situation? You have to cash them in then.
That's right.
All right.
And hopefully their health isn't such that they're going to be in a difficult position to get other life insurance. Every once in a while that happens, but when it does, we found that most of those policies, they haven't had them a long time, so there's not a lot of value there, and it doesn't become a terrible issue for some of these people.
Now, since we're on the topic of life insurance, what about other life insurance policies that maybe they're the benefactor of?
Yeah, if during the course of the bankruptcy or leading into the bankruptcy, a relative or a friend dies and they named you as the beneficiary, and the policy isn't real large, you get to keep up to the first $15,000 of the money. So if you were left a large sum, then that can be a sticky situation. And in bankruptcy, we've talked about this in other segments, if somebody were to die within 6 months of you filing your bankruptcy, we had mentioned that your inheritance would come into question. Now, the life insurance is separate from the inheritance because it's a contractual policy that's given, it's kind of carved out. But again, If it's 10 or 15,000, great, you get to keep it. If it's 20 or 50,000, then you get to keep 15, and then the rest of the money is going to come into the bankruptcy court to apply towards your debts. So if it was a case that only had $20,000 or $25,000 in debts, they're going to be pretty happy because they're going to get a substantial payment.
Right.
If there was $100,000 in debt, although the client may be a little bit unhappy that he's not getting the full amount, he's still getting a major benefit in the bankruptcy, even with some of that money going to the creditors. But then if you get into these large policies and it was like $100,000, oh well, there's nothing that anybody can do.
Right,
So.
but again, it'd be, you have to pay off what you owe and then you get the remainder.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, if there's enough to cover what you owe and there's still money left, then it goes back to the person.
Got it.
So if someone's getting $1 million, well, everyone's happy.
Okay.
Right.
That's the whole
I'd be
idea.
happy with that. As far as life insurance, is there a time limit on that? Like you can only do it so far around when you're filing for bankruptcy?
The money, are you talking about the money if someone dies?
Well, if you have a policy and you want to liquidate it or
Yes.
you want to get rid of it, is there, because there's some things that you can't do 6 months out, a year out. Is there an issue with your life insurance?
You can plan leading into your bankruptcy, and if you need to liquidate something because it's not going to be protected, you can liquidate that and shuffle it into something that is protected days before you
I'd say
file.
a couple of days prior.
Days
okay.
before.
Okay, so and that won't be, they won't
And
look
that'll
at
be
that.
fine.
Okay.
Now there is an issue though with the life insurance we were talking about with our bankruptcy planning. There was a time where the law didn't put a cap on how much you could shovel into your life insurance right before filing.
Okay.
But then many years ago they made a tweak to that, and so now you can only put in $10,000 within 2 years of the case being filed. So that's a significant limitation
Right.
Yeah,
for
big
some of
time.
our planning.
Okay.
Because you know, we do have clients that have far more than $10,000 of things that we need to move around to protect, and that was one of our most valuable tools was life insurance. 10,000 is still kind of nice, but that was a pretty good limit. They stuck onto that.
Right. So what are some other things we're not thinking about?
Well, a major thing for many people, because anyone these days that works, I think many majority of people have some kind of retirement plan where they work. If it's a full-time job, we've got 401k plans that are offered at jobs. Government employees are offered IPERS as a retirement. It's a mandatory retirement. If anybody works for any of the colleges and universities in the state, they get something called TIAA-CREF. Again, it's a mandatory contribution, and those funds are all protected in bankruptcy. IRAs are protected in bankruptcy.
Oh, okay.
So these are really good property protections because, again, for people that have worked for a long time and they're in their 50s, maybe even in their 60s, and they're getting close to retirement, and they've run into terrible debt situations. I mean, we've had clients that had into hundreds of thousands of dollars in their retirement, and that's 100% protected when they file bankruptcy.
That is great news.
And the other thing that's kind of leads into connects to that is that's why people shouldn't borrow that money out of their 401ks when they can and pay debts with it in an effort to avoid bankruptcy, because those are protected funds, and we've seen time and time again where people have kind of dipped into that and paid off $20,000 and $30,000 of debt at a time, and unfortunately they didn't learn, and then they're back there doing it again, and eventually they do end up in bankruptcy anyway. So they've really caused harm to their retirements
And
by
drained a lot of-
draining out all that
Great
money.
advice.
A lot of stuff going on, a lot of things you can keep if you do happen to have to file for bankruptcy. And again, if you have any questions, Michael, still tons of questions out there. They can get a hold of you really easily, can't they?
Yeah, they can call me on the phone at 255-1855, or you can reach me on the internet at www.iowa-bankruptcylaw.com.
There it is, perfect. Thank you so much. Again, we'll visit with you again, and we'll get caught up. We'll continue on with the conversation because there's so much to tell you about when it comes to bankruptcy, and this guy knows it all. We will be right back. It is 8:51, and when we return, what's it like to travel around Iowa Speedway at speed? Well, we're going to show you next on CW Iowa Live.